Hey you guys, welcome back to another one of my videos. If you're new here, my name is Holly and thank you so much for watching. Before I get started, I wanted to just quickly say this isn't sponsored or anything. I bought these with my own money, but these are my earrings today. They're so cute and they're from this little company called Art by Peach, and she doesn't know that I'm shouting her out or anything, but I just thought they were super cute, so I thought I'd give her a little shout out because she's a small business. But without further ado, let's get into this case. Today I wanted to cover the case of Sarahjane Dower. This case doesn't have that much information, so this might be a shorter video, but I feel like that's why it's so important to cover cases like this, because there really isn't that much information out there on Sarahjane Dower. Before we get into it though, I want to let you know that I will be discussing topics such as domestic violence as well as PTSD. So if either of those things are triggering to you, I would suggest that you click off now. But Sarahjane was born on the 17th of December 1985 to her mother Faye. I'm not sure if her father was involved in her life because I really couldn't find any information on him, but growing up she was definitely surrounded by people who loved and cared for her. Sarahjane, who everyone called Sarah, had at least two sisters, one of which was quite a bit younger than her, and she will become a lot more relevant later on in this case. But Sarah was someone who was super funny. She always had the people around her laughing, and she was also very outgoing and independent. In 1999, when Sarah was about 14 and still in high school, she started dating a fellow student who was called Devner. I wanted to point out that in the court documents that I used to create this video, it said that she started dating him in 1999, but from what I could tell, he was about 5 or 6 years older than her, meaning that he would have been about 19 when she was 14. And I feel like at that age, that is quite a big age gap, but that's just my opinion. When Sarah was 17 in 2003, she actually found out that she was pregnant to Kynan, who at the time would have been about 22. The couple were overjoyed to find out that they were having a little boy who they ended up calling Malik, and they were just really happy. Sarah spent a lot of time looking after her baby boy, and she really enjoyed motherhood. Everyone around her said that she was a great mum. Sarah wasn't just a mother though, she also absolutely loved to socialize, and when she turned 18, she was known to at times go out with her friends and boyfriend. One place that she went often was a pub called the Criterion, and this also isn't really relevant to the case at all, so I didn't know where to add this, but around this time Sarah actually got herself a motorbike license. I remember when I was in Thailand, I rode a moped for the first time and I actually fell off, and I will literally never do it again. But good for her. I feel like this kind of just shows her more fearless side. For the next few years, Sarah just lived her life hanging out with her friends and her partner and looking after her little boy. Kynan, from around December of 2005, actually started working in the Australian Defence Force, or Army, and he worked as an infantry soldier. I didn't actually know what this was, so here's a definition if some of you guys are like me and didn't know what this was either. According to defencejobs.com.au, infantry is the primary combat arm of the Australian Army. The role of the infantry is to seek out and close with the enemy, to kill or capture them, to seize and hold ground, repel attack by day or by night, regardless of season, weather or terrain. To carry out this role, the Royal Australian Infantry Corps, RAINF, relies heavily on skilled tactics, effective teamwork, and cooperation with other corps. During his service, he was deployed to Timor-Leste and Afghanistan, and he served for 5 years before being medically discharged in August of 2010, which I will talk about in more detail in a little bit, but let's get back to Sarah. In 2006, Sarah and Kynan welcomed their second baby boy, who they called either Lucius or Lucius. For the sake of this video, I'm gonna pronounce it Lucius, and I really hope that's the right way that his name is pronounced, but I'm just not entirely sure. But again, Sarah loved being a mother and thoroughly enjoyed the time she spent with her children. Kynan provided for the two boys by being in the army, but Sarah also worked. She worked many different jobs throughout the years, but I believe she mostly worked in clubs and pubs, doing various different roles, and I can imagine she would have been really good at her job because she was just such a naturally kind, bubbly, outgoing person. The following year, in 2007, Sarah and Kynan's relationship had actually broken down completely and they became separated. There really is not a lot of information out there about Kynan, but what I do know is both within and after the relationship there were documented instances of domestic violence. According to Sarah, when Kynan came back from East Timor, he beat her up, threw a TV on her, and then smashed up the kitchen, and then tried to stab himself and blame it on Sarah. And when the couple broke up, Sarah actually took out a domestic violence order against Kynan. Sarah became the primary carer for their two kids, but Kynan was still involved with Malik and Lucius. And at this point, Sarah had moved into a place in the small town of Ayr with her two little boys and her younger 13-year-old sister as well. Ayr is a small country town which in 2016, according to the census, had a population of 8,738. It is located in Queensland, about an hour south of Townsville, which is the closest city. Because Ayr is so remote, it really is quite a cheap place to live. In fact, I think it's one of the cheapest suburbs I've researched so far, as you can see on this graph. It does seem like a beautiful town though. There is a really nice art gallery, a drive-in movie theater, which looks like a lot of fun. And you're also pretty close to the ocean in Ayr, and that part of the ocean is actually part of the Great Barrier Reef, which is just absolutely beautiful. And so even though Ayr is a small town, I feel like it does have a lot to offer. Even though Sarah did move to Ayr, her troubles with Kynan did not stop there. By the 3rd of June 2009, the two parents had been to family court at least once, with the agreement being that the children live with their mother and that they spend time with the father at all reasonable times as agreed by the two parties, and failing agreement from Friday afternoon until Sunday afternoon each week. 2009 was an interesting year for Kynan. He was actually by this point married to another woman, and although it seemed like this relationship was going well, we can't really say the same for his work life. During his deployment in 2009, Kynan displayed symptoms of being psychologically unwell. He was referred to the Veterans and Veterans Families Counselling Services, which when abbreviated is just called VVCS. And this service is actually now called Open Arms, but for the sake of this video, I'll call it VVCS. And in November of 2009, he started a therapeutic relationship with a private psychologist called Dr. B. A few months later, in August of 2010, Kynan was officially discharged from the Australian Army, and he continued his psychology sessions with Dr. B. There were actually a few occasions in these sessions where Kynan mentioned words to the effect of, "I want to end Sarah's life." And because of this, Dr. B decided it was appropriate to send a report to VVCS in regards to Kynan's extreme anger against Sarah. But from what I could see, that document didn't actually mention the fact that he had implied he wanted to end Sarah's life. It just spoke about his extreme anger towards her. His amount of weekly sessions was upped though at around this time, but by August of 2011 he had actually stopped seeing the psychologist completely. March of 2012 saw Sarah back in court because she had filed a private application for a domestic violence protection order in the magistrate's court. I want to read part of this application to you guys, as this is written by Sarah, obviously, and it refers to her relationship with her ex. I feel like it just explains what was going on pretty well, but it is quite long, so grab a snack or a drink or something if you want. Yesterday, the 11th of the 3rd, 2012, I was at my ex-partner's mother's house to collect my children and nearly had them in the truck when Kynan arrived. His mother had rung him. He started to tell them to get back up the stairs. I was telling them to get in the truck. I asked him if he was going to keep this up in front of the children. When he started screaming and said I was a fucking lousy mum, I let the children go, as I did not want them to see this. The children had gone round to their grandmother's house and wanted to see their dad. The behaviour is only allowed to go on because neither Kynan and his mother follow the family court order that we have in place. It is very hard for me to tell them what is right when Kynan and his mother allow this to happen. I've made an appointment with family relationships to discuss the breaches of the order and to commence mediation once again to clear up this matter. On February 16th, Kynan had the children because they did the running over to the grandmother's, and she called him and he had gone and picked them up. I was not home, but my 13-year-old sister was home alone. He was screaming for me and my sister said that I was not there. He smashed at the door to get in, and then he kept smashing the door when he was inside. He said to my sister, "You were very lucky I let you live." She was terrified of him. I cannot have him coming to my home and behaving in this manner. We have a family court order in place and it did work for a while, but it is falling apart now. My oldest, who is 8 years old, has decided that going over to grandmother's place whenever it pleases is the thing to do. The youngest goes with the oldest. I've told them not to do this and I'm having trouble stopping them because the grandmother, instead of saying this is not the right thing to do and bring them home, allows it to happen. She then rings the father and he comes and gets them. I'm trying very hard to deal with this properly, but I'm not getting any support. All I get from their father is constant abuse. He calls me terrible names, fucking mole, dumb bitch, pathetic excuse of a mother, and more. I'm tired of it all. I want to get on with my life and give my children a good upbringing. Kynan seems to delight in encouraging the children to behave, in brackets SIC, and I have made an appointment for the children to see their guidance officer at school as well. I am at my wit's end. I want to make a note that that is just Sarah's side of the story, but I really wanted to include that part because I think it gives us a better idea of how turbulent the relationship was. And at this time, Sarah was granted a temporary protection order, which meant that Kynan was unable to try to contact, ask somebody to contact Sarah directly or indirectly, and was not allowed to enter or remain at any place that Sarah was at. And she wanted to put her sister on the protection order as well because of what had happened previously with Kynan coming into their house when the sister was there. Kynan was not in court that day because he wasn't required to be, but that meant the court needed to organize another day to finalize the protection order. Basically, how these things work is you can't get a formal protection order without the other person, so in this case Kynan being there, because they need to be able to defend themselves. Basically, you can't just put a protection order on someone without them being able to say their side of the story, which is why initially Sarah got that temporary protection order, because she's allowed one of those because it is just temporary. I hope that part makes sense. But this is where things started to get complicated. A new date for the 13th of April 2012 was set. Kynan was there with his lawyer, but Sarah actually didn't show. There was a police prosecutor there though, who was working in support of Sarah, and that police prosecutor actually asked the magistrate if Sarah had been sent a notice to tell her that she needed to come to court that day. The magistrate actually replied saying that it was not normal for such a notice to be issued, but the thing was, the magistrate was actually wrong. Sarah should have been sent a notice to attend, but she wasn't. But because the magistrate believed this, they decided to remove Sarah's temporary protection order. You're probably wondering why no one in the courtroom told the magistrate that they were wrong. But the thing about court is that no one argues with the magistrate. All of this meant that Sarah was now unprotected, and she didn't even know, because obviously she wasn't at court that day. She didn't even realize court was going on that day. And even after the fact, no one got in contact with her to let her know. And what made this even worse is the fact that Kynan did know that the protection order had been dropped, because he was there in court that day. Fast forward to the 1st of September 2012, Sarah had told her mum Faye that she was going out to meet her ex-partner Kynan at a McDonald's in Ayr to discuss parenting arrangements. Faye was obviously worried for her daughter's safety, but Sarah reassured her that she would be fine because they were meeting up in a public place. Sarah was actually meant to start work that day at 4 p.m. and her plan was to go out, meet up with Kynan, come back, get changed and ready for his shift and go start work. Sadly though, when Sarah left that morning to go see Kynan, that would be the last time that her family ever saw her alive. Sarah's mum became really worried when her daughter didn't return home before the time she was meant to start her shift at work. She called her daughter's work to see if maybe Sarah had just been running late and decided to go straight there instead of coming home. But Sarah's work confirmed to her what Faye had feared, which was that her daughter hadn't turned up there either. By this point, even Sarah's extended family were trying to get in contact with her, calling her mobile relentlessly, but by about 11:30 at night, when no one had heard from her, they decided to contact the police. Police actually got on top of this case pretty quick. They called Kynan Devener straight away. He told them Sarah and him had met up at McDonald's as planned. They talked calmly about their parenting arrangements and nothing out of the ordinary happened. Police contacted him again the following day, which was September 2nd at around 5 a.m. and he stuck to his story. At 9:30 a.m. on September the 3rd, 2012, a few members of the Australian Defence Force came across a burnt-out vehicle on a dirt track near Kilbottom Creek in the Mingala Range. This is an area that forms part of the Army training grounds, located about an hour and a half away from Ayr. The vehicle was confirmed pretty quickly to be that of Sarah Dowers, and the reason that this vehicle drew attention from the Army members was because it looked to be completely burnt out. When the two members of the Australian Defence Force took a closer look at this vehicle, they actually realised that inside the vehicle they could see human remains on the back seat. They then immediately reported this to the Queensland police, who wasted no time getting out there to look at this crime scene. Through dental records and DNA analysis, police were able to confirm that the body that had been found was that of Sarahjane Dowers. Kynan was arrested on suspicion of murder, and it actually didn't take very long before he confessed to the murder. He said that instead of meeting Sarah at McDonald's that day, he suggested that they meet at his mother's house, who lived in a suburb nearby called Rossiter's Hill. Kynan's mother was out shopping at the time that Sarah arrived at the residence, and he'd actually purposely planned this so that he could attack Sarah as soon as she got there. He stabbed the mother of his children in the neck twice, and according to his statement, drove the knife all the way in. And I'm just going to read his statement for the next part. And remember, Sarah isn't here to give her side of the story, but according to Kynan, this is what happened next. She yelled out no. I grabbed her and pushed her to the ground, and sort of half my weight was on her, holding her down, and by then the pain had set in and she was immobilized. She was breathing heavily and gasping for air, and she was just staring at me. I said, "Ah, you're going to die. I'm not going to get thee. I'm not ringing the ambulance. So I told her I'd get you, bitch. She was sort of fighting a little bit, grabbing the chairs. I pushed them out of the way so she couldn't grab anything. From my mind, it was taking so long. So I hit her again. I needed it done then and there. I then got into her truck. I reversed it back. I cleaned up. I put her in. I drove straight to Townsville, dumped her off, and I walked back. Opportunity had arisen. I decided to take it. When she turned up by herself. If she had turned up with probably someone in the car, probably wouldn't have happened. But eventually it would have. This wasn't gonna go away. I wasn't going to watch my kids go through that anymore. Then they had to. She was pretty much immobilized on the ground, just bleeding out. I was holding her down, yeah, and she was kind of moving, fighting, and yeah, used to everything that was going through my head, what she had done. I'm lucky I stopped it too. I would have done a lot worse, in brackets, stabbed her in the neck area again. I wanted her dead. As much as I'm a bad person, she's just bad for doing what she's done, in brackets, her parenting. I don't know how he could have done anything worse than what he did to her, to be honest, but that was his statement. Once Kynan had transported Sarah's body to, he said Townsville, but it was kind of on the outskirts of Townsville. He set fire to the vehicle using petrol that he had purchased earlier that day before he saw Sarah. He disclosed that he had returned to the Hervey Range site the following day to reignite the vehicle when he saw that Sarah's body was basically untouched from the first fire that he had set. He said that the next day he had redoused the vehicle, this time using more fuel. On the 17th of July 2015, Kynan Devener was found guilty of the murder of Sarahjane Dower. He was also charged with 2 counts of arson and misconduct of a corpse by interfering. He could have also been charged with breaching a protection order, but there wasn't one in place because Sarah hadn't been made aware that the previous one had ended. I actually read that once Kynan was put in jail, he actually had to be moved because he had a hip put on him. And this doesn't really surprise me, to be honest, because a lot of the time men who have committed domestic violence acts don't get treated very well by other inmates when they're in jail. As for Sarah's children, they are being taken care of by Sarah's mother Faye as well as her sisters. The community of Ayr and Townsville really came together after this tragedy and created a trust fund for the boys, which I'm sure helped the boys a lot in these past 10 years. But that is basically everything I have on this case. I hope that you guys found this video interesting. I know that there wasn't as many photos and stuff as normal. That's just because of the nature of this case not being as publicized as other ones I've covered. And I'm going to start linking all the documents that I use for these videos below. So if you want to see any extra information or see where I've gotten my information from, you know where to find it. I will also link some domestic violence as well as PTSD related information below if you guys want to learn more about those things. I would really recommend having a read. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope that I will see you in my next video. Bye, you guys.